So it's 6 o'clock. I'm gonna call this meeting to order. Before we do anything else, I'm going to entertain a motion to pull item 6 as per the recommendation of Corporation Counsel. Second. Okay, so that's moved by Supervisor Hanson, seconded by Supervisor Defferting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that carries. We are going to strike item 6 from the agenda for tonight. Okay, with that done, do I have a motion to accept the minutes from May 11th, 2023?
Also move.
Second. Okay, moved by Supervisor Average, seconded by Supervisor Defferting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, that carries. Okay. All right, so with that, for this meeting, I am disappointed we have to skip section 6, but that is that. We can't really do anything else outside of that. For this, the way I saw this is for this meeting, we would kind of round out the research we've been doing as individuals and as a group, analyzing kind of what we've done within the bounds of what we can discuss tonight, and signifying a path forward. So those are just my comments on that. Closing item 3, opening item 4, public comments within the jurisdiction of this committee. Do you have any public comments in person from the jurisdiction of this committee? Once, twice, 3 times. Do we have any comments on Zoom within the jurisdiction of this committee? Once, twice, 3 times. Okay. Closing item 4, opening item 5, communication shared by committee members. Do we have any communication shared by committee members?
I'll go ahead and chime in. I spoke briefly with our former county board chair, Shiloh Ramos. And I spoke with him about a little bit about what we're doing here, and taking a look at how we're looking at how to be more efficient with our county government. And he actually expressed strong support in what we're doing with this task force, is taking a look at this at our committee structure and figuring out how we can be more efficient with our operations. He also used to be on Appleton City Council too, and Neenah City Council, and he definitely misses being on the county board too. That he just was in a certain phase in his life where he just needed to dedicate more time to his family, but he really misses being a servant to the county. And he definitely thinks that what we're doing here is definitely worthwhile. He is in fully support of it. He definitely feels that there could be some things that we could look into consolidating in regards to our committee structure. So that was just one thing that popped up recently that I'd like to share.
Excellent. Anybody else have anything at this time before we move into next item? Okay, so with that, we'll close item 5. We're skipping item 6, and by default, item 7. Opening item 8 is some of our research. So for this, I do want to share a couple things that I communicated with Corporation Counsel. I talked to everybody about a couple things. The first one is about our recommendations versus a resolution. In our recommendations, the Corporation Counsel recommended that any resolution that is drawn up, and I will sit down with Mary Ann when she gets back from vacation, kind of about the nuts and bolts of this. Any resolution that we would do would have to come from JPS. And so what we could do is we could essentially write a report, right? And then send that report off to JPS. And it basically would be some form of this, but a little bit more kind of dug into what we've done, kind of covering our bases, who we invited to speak, who we communicated with, what we found throughout the process. Send that off to JPS with a few recommendations, and then JPS would then consider whether or not they wanted to write a resolution, and then they would deal with that on their end, which would essentially conclude our business as a task force. That's the way that I would suppose going about this, but I wanted to open it up to the committee in terms of giving a report to JPS. I know there were a couple questions about the legitimacy of the resolution, the self-organizing resolution that came from the task force on per diems. The reason why I think they were okay with that and they get away with that because the task force had a very narrow structure, which is per diems. There was a certain member of this task force that thought it prudent to possibly bring up a discussion about shrinking the size of the board here. And I wonder is this limited to just committees, commissions, or boards? Or do we just, in order to avoid that, and about those questions about do you have the legitimacy to actually write anything versus a recommendation, that we just give a recommendation and a report to JPS, and if JPS feels like they can act on it, then they can. That was the way I saw it. I'll open it up to the committee or the task force if they feel. Yes.
I think that, we need to stay focused on what our task force is for. And that is specifically focusing on committee structure.
Yes.
And I think that, when it comes to actual board size, that is to me, that is a completely different subject matter. And so if and when we do decide to write a report of our recommendations, of our findings to Judiciary Public Safety Committee, we should stay focused on the actual committee structure and not the county board size. Besides, we have already had that debate before, and that was a resounding, pretty close. It wasn't a close conclusion. It was a very resounding conclusion of that we're staying where we're at. So I think, we should just simply focus on the committee structure part of it in our report.
I agree. The reason I brought up the board size was because the resolution that brought us to life as a task force seemed to be a little bit more interpretable than just the one on per diems was per diems. That was it. I agree with Brian very much. It's just any report that we do, it would just be solely focused on just committees. The major ones jurisdiction and also the 3 boards of jurisdiction of the major ones. And that would be it. That would be the only thing that would be discussed. That would be the only thing that would be included in the recommendation. If anyone else has anything else to add to that, I think we've pretty much touched a lot of bases. We've talked to our department heads. We've talked to our board members. We've looked at what other counties have done. We've looked at other reports that this county has done in the past, and there have been multiple. We brought in another county executive. We talked to another county administrator, and we got the input from a former board chair. So in terms of, doing the legwork on what the actual structure should look like, I think we've done a fairly good job of doing a pretty broad expanse of what's around. The next question would be, how do we round this out? There are thoughts, I've had some thoughts to myself about, okay, should this task force write a resolution? And I did realize that there would be questions about whether or not this task force actually can do that. And so I think I may be repeating myself. I think it's in our best interest to write a report, send it off, and then our work here is complete. We can give all the research that we've done. That's, like everything we've done, I've collected in here. What that we can share. I think there may be a question about those surveys. What I may do is, 4 of the 5 of us sit on JPS. Most of us will have those survey documents, but for the chairman, I'll write a summary and give it to him, because I don't think it's a good idea to share this with anyone outside of who sits on his task force.
So on 8, I think both Supervisor Swamp and Deputy have said what I was thinking, that we have to stay on task and that we have done a lot of research, and through helpful people that have been here. Brian had a lot of information, you had a lot of information. So that's all I want to say on 8. When we get to 9, I've got more to say.
I just concur with everyone. I appreciate having the discussion. I hope that if anybody knows me from the board, that's what they take away, is I will always have the discussion. So I like presenting it for the board. again, to reiterate what I said at the very beginning, before we voted on even creating these. In the discussion, I like talking about change, but that doesn't mean we have to. I need to understand, at least for me, in the way we present the recommendation and the report, making the argument of why it's a good change.
All right, Brian, do you have anything else to add? Nope. So closing item 8, opening item 9, consideration of possible vote, the recommendations on the structure. So would probably like to regear this a little bit and have this be the report that we would send to JBS, and not have just this be the report, but have something a little bit more comprehensive, and a little bit deeper. And then, I guess we can discuss whether or not we want to meet again to review that report before we send it off, or if this task force feels comfortable with authorizing a report being typed up, and then that report, once it's done, is then sent to JPS. So instead of having this saying like, okay, here's option 1, option 2, option 3, it's here's the sum of all their work in a little bit of greater detail. And go from there. So what do you guys think?
So here's my thought on this.
Sure.
And I'm all for change, but I want that change to flow if we do a consolidation. And I don't know if we're there yet, but we're close. So I don't know if I want to give an example because one of it's airport facilities and highways, so I'm gonna go there.
Right.
I don't think that would flow as good in this county as it may flow in another county.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm kind of indecisive as to what we can consolidate that will still flow, or what we could eliminate as a standing committee. Because I had a thought of one thing we could eliminate, and then as I got there, I thought, does that sound like I have this vendetta that I want to get rid of a committee? And then I wasn't sure how the legislative would then be handled, because I'll bring that one up. So all the chairs of all the committees serve on the legislative. You can call it by default, but the chairs make up the legislative committee. And so then if we group the committees, then we have less chairs, and then we have less representation on the legislative because you only have the chairs going. So an example would be if we get down to 5 groups, we have 5 chairs.
Right.
Then I got worried about the length of these meetings when you consolidate. And I think Brian would be with me on this. Planning and zoning is one of those. We have viewing tomorrow. We got 6 items. We'll be on the road for 3 hours, but that's a meeting. So if we're part of something else, how does that flow? If you're a member of 3 that are consolidated, you're automatically going to be going on that viewing because there's no way we can get rid of that. You're going to have a public hearing. You're going to have the deliberative. So I don't know how you combine that. Facilities had a meeting yesterday, which is interesting because they was on first of the month, but they have a lot on their plate. They had like 12 items. So I'm thinking, how long are these meetings going to be when you consolidate? Because you guys have that going on already with judiciary. You got 3.5 hours. I'm thinking we could be longer. So we got to keep that in mind too when we consolidate. So I don't know if I'm there yet to do a report, but I want to be there because I think we're so close to being done that we could come up. But I don't know that we have our groupings figured out yet.
And I do, and that's why I want to take a look at, because I have 3 cases. And case 1 is kind of taking into account those other items. And this is not even, this is only part of the equation. The other part of the equation is in any resolution that gets drawn up, we're going to have to rewrite how many members, what do we do with citizens? Because like, for example, information technology, we're now formerly information service, now information technology. What are we gonna do with the one citizen on that committee? Do we just tell them, thank you, but, you know, we're reshuffling, or do we find a place for that? Also, and this is a part of the conversation we're gonna have to have with corporation counsel, and I think you guys would behoove you to also ask those questions to them too. Mary Ann, when she comes back. By statute, does does the Board of Health, does our Board of Health mirror exactly what we have to do by state statute, or did we design ours differently? Because if state statute says, okay, your Board of Health has to have at least one citizen. Well, as I recall, at last time I checked, the Board of Health chair is a citizen member. So for that, that's a little bit more technical, but that's a question I had. And, planning and zoning, I think I've come to the conclusion planning and zoning should be left alone because of those feelings.
And I don't want you to all jump on the bandwagon with me, but just so everybody realizes what goes on with that committee. If you join it with something else, just know that those committee members have to go. So now a committee member, instead of having maybe one committee meeting of a consolidated 3 committees a month, you could have 3 plus 1 plus 1. You could have 7. So then are you accomplishing a good flow? Then there might be people that want to be on that consolidation because you're looking at that almighty per diem or whatever it is. Because there are people that think that way. I don't think that way, but there are. So I haven't heard us give any groupings that we think would work for this county. I've heard me say, I'd like airport left alone. I'd like planning and zoning. What do we do about Parkview? And you brought up a great, excellent point about Board of Health and Human Services. Are those statutorily governed that we're not going to get into changing state statutes?
No, but I mean, other counties have gotten away with, like, for example, now Fond du Lac doesn't have a human services department. Does Ozaki County have a human services department? Because they were able to do those groupings, right? And so I think within statute, you can get away with some consolidation. I think because clearly other counties have done that and they've been okay with doing it. My question is, okay, well, then what do you do with the citizen members that currently sit on it? And then how do you dole out, okay, appointments of citizens versus appointments of county supervisors? And I think that's more the technical aspect that would come into play once we write our report, and then it would be up to JPS to see, okay, how do we want to write this? Because I don't think we have, I'm just going back to this, I don't think we have the authority to write. As great as that would be, I worry there would be a lot of questions asked about our legitimacy as a task force to write anything that would consolidate. And then there's also the question is, okay, well, you have certain boards that are in county code, but then the committees are in the rules. So would any resolution that we write, would that have to, and I'm thinking out loud because I would like to bulletproof any arguments that would possibly come up, okay? We would then have to go ahead and there would at least be one, obviously, but possibly 2 resolutions, because we would maybe have to change the ordinance, and we would definitely have to change the rule. So if we have to change an ordinance then, and I've only been on board for a brief period, but I will open this up to the group. Have you ever seen a resolution that changes both an ordinance and a rule and you say, yeah, so it's gonna have to be those 2? So for that, and now I think when you look at some of the things that flow, what I think public works, if you look at option 1, and I, kind of drew those up, I really like, of all of these, I prefer option 1 the most, because it takes the kind of unique aspects that we have as a county. Like, for example, our airport's not Fond du Lac's airport. With all due respect to Fond du Lac. Right. And planning and zoning is its own animal. And I think it's important to recognize, you know, I mean, sacred cows exist, but at the same time, this is not a sacred cow. This is very much a practical doing instead of a, you know, I don't want to touch this because it would be unpopular. It's logistically wouldn't make sense. Right. And so we're now down to 9. I, for one, think that, and, you know, maybe every supervisor might not agree with this, but I, for one, like our JPS meetings. And get a good breadth of what's going on. I think JPS is a good model for how committees, I may be a little bit biased, but I think it's a good
Yeah,
model.
well, you guys sit
Right.
on there and I don't think that it doesn't flow.
Right. But granted, I mean, there are some things that do and don't. There could be some questions about, you know, whether or not the register of deeds would sit well within JPS, but I don't, you know, really want to go there. But I mean, you know, you have other, like child support. I mean, I know that falls in the court system, but, you know, still the county clerk, right? You guys sit within the jurisdiction of JPS. I know you guys do amazing work. Do you fall under the realm of public safety though? Right?
I would question that.
So, I mean,
Do they need to fall somewhere?
there's something statute.
So,
They don't.
because you've got
Yeah.
county clerk, you've got county treasurer, you've
Right.
got register of deeds.
Right.
Do they need to fall somewhere? Or do they, unless they really have something that would be judiciary, but they can survive by themselves, and you want a jurisdiction of where they fall? I don't know, are we overstretching, overreaching? I don't know.
I think it was more of, I guess, kind of rhetorical exercise, just about GPS itself. But for you guys, I mean, looking at kind of, if we're gonna do some bigger groupings, and I'm looking at, on option 1, item 1, item 3, and 4, and 5. I think the one, when you're writing a resolution, the one that's probably gonna be the toughest to swing is probably gonna be item 5. But I think item 5 has the most flow to it, in my opinion. In my opinion, right? Other people can speak to it differently if they do, and I know that there may be some different opinions for that. Item 3, having information technology. I sit on that committee. I do kind of think it could be something where just Patty could report to NF. And I guess the question maybe we could just, I mean, my
So-
opinion is we could just eliminate it, but. I mean,
Eliminate the committee.
Yeah.
I tend to agree. I don't know that a committee of PNF and information technology does it for me.
Right.
Okay, and is there that much that Patty could report to PNF? She wouldn't need to be there monthly, but
No. We hardly.
right now
meet
she comes
quarterly
to
as a-
county. Yeah,
And so, you know, a lot of times she reports to county board. I've seen sometimes when she reports to JPS for a certain.
okay, for certain,
For certain items,
Yeah.
right? And, you know, I guess I was just trying to find a place to put her.
Yeah.
To be blunt.
because you
And-
don't want to
Right.
say you're not important.
Right, because she is, she's.
Oh,
she's a
yeah.
department head just like the rest of us, and without her, these iPads don't work.
Right.
So, neither does that.
But
So
where does she fit in?
my swing was that she would probably be best within administration. And, or finance and administration. You could
Okay.
just create the name, or you could just leave this personnel and finance, and Patty would report there, or Patty could report to GPS. I
And
guess
not have a committee?
possibly, or maybe there'd be an argument that she could best be under public works or possibly new facilities.
I get the personnel and finance part, I
Sure.
get that, but I don't, and that's the one I'm struggling with, where does it go? So,
Yes.
I think, you know, given the feedback that we've received, I believe that information technology probably would be best fit in personnel and finance. I think that just from the feedback that I've received, it seems to be that we would just kind of follow that feedback and put it there. I think, another possibility would be public works, simply because, I mean, it is, part of that as well. I think that, it just seems to, for me, it just seems to fit a little bit more in personnel and finance.
Okay,
And they may grumble about it a little bit, but the fact is she really doesn't have a whole lot.
she may not have to report every month.
Right.
It would be
You
very,
know,
very much similar to how emergency management is to GPS. where-
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good point.
Eric will report to us when we want it.
And maybe sometimes he doesn't have anything.
Yeah, or like the DA, sometimes the DA may not have a whole lot.
What do you think?
I like where you're going. I'm completely open.
And this will be from my side, natural resources, UW Education, Extension, Agriculture. I wasn't sure that we needed a committee on that. That was in my mind,
Sure.
because the UW Extension and Ag will survive without a committee.
Sure.
So I'm still doing that. Parkview, I don't know where Parkview is gonna be. Does it fit in Health and Human Services? It does.
Yes.
But I have no idea where Parkview will be in the future. Okay, 'cause it's- I think
That's a
Human
whole
Services
separate-
Board and Board of Health. We've got some citizens that are on there that are nurses or doctors, or I don't want to lose those people, and they're not on the county board. Shiloh was a gift that he was on Board of Health because he was our chairman and he was a doctor, and it worked out. But I think you can't forget about Mr. Citizen because they sometimes add up. So I guess if you're doing that, does Parkview need to stand alone by itself? I would say not if it's covered well under Health and Human Services.
I would agree with that as well. I think Parkview Health Center is a perfect fit for health and human services.
Yeah, I don't know what else you do with it.
Right.
It just,
It sits at a crossroads between the two of them. It does. I mean, we went on the tour, we saw the crisis center near Parkview, and then we saw the training center in the middle of that. So I think even physically, in its layout, it's a good nexus for that. So I mean, would you, I guess talking about
to me,
eliminating.
number 5 is good.
Okay.
And that's a consolidation, so,
Yeah.
and I'm open to, that part of it, but I think it's a fit.
I think it is a fit. I think out of everything we have here, this flows, item 5 probably flows the best.
Yes,
Um,
and I'm hoping all of you.
I agree.
Yeah.
Items, that makes absolute sense to me.
items 6 through 9. Okay, so the question you had about legislative, something I thought of is if we get down to a smaller number of committee sizes, would it be prudent if, and then say that legislative now only has 9 people on it, if we opened up the vice chairs of committees too,
That's a good thought.
right? And then from there, then it would be back, and what is it currently set at 15?
But they don't meet that, legislative doesn't meet every month either,
Right.
but it seemed inappropriate, silly, whatever, that you could have only 5 people on legislative.
Right.
Then do you need legislative? That was a
The school
thought.
board has legislative, but again,
I'm sorry, who is legislative? I didn't hear you.
so, like, for example, like a small legislative committee, and I think because we're a bigger county board.
Mhm. We have a big legislative,
It is big, it's a big. It's like half the county board. And so. The Oshkosh Area School District has legislative. But there are only 7 people. So it's a smaller institution. With smaller legislative committee. I just think, that makes sense.
it
but-
might flow.
So I think if we're looking at 9, possibly 10, you know.
Then we're
some-
not changing it that much.
Not necessarily, yeah.
Okay.
And so we have that, I think, you know, I guess the contingency for legislative is that if too small, invite vice chairs. Solid waste board, okay. I'd like to have a conversation about solid waste board.
Let's go for it, I would too.
I understand that the way it's been run has kind of turned it into a quasi-independent governing institution. I think they are the only committee commissioner where we have in Winnebago County that, from what I gather, because I've heard Paul say it a lot, has the authority to levy its own taxes. Is that correct? Is that or not? Or was that just kind of
Well, I think wasn't necessarily that it can levy its own taxes, but fees, I think. was-
Fees,
Yeah,
it can
levy
levy
its
its
own
own landfill fees or whatever you want to call it, yes.
I know that it's kind of gained a semi-mythical status as an institution. However, I think it would fit awfully well within Public Works, but for the purpose of this argument, I left it out. What are thoughts about moving it somewhere?
So we have 4 enterprises in
Yes.
this county. The airport,
Yes.
Parkview, the highway, and solid waste. They're all 4 enterprises. I don't know the history of how they got there. But the only one I ever hear about, leave it alone, is solid waste. So I'm gonna give you an example. Aviation is gonna get that $200,000 grant.
Mhm.
So items in the budget will not be spent because we're getting that grant, okay? It's a payback, so Jim went and got 200,000, he's gonna use it for the tower, and it can only be used for tower items.
Right.
But he has money in the budget. So he won't be spending the budget money, okay? Solid waste doesn't get in the middle of any of that. Solid waste is an enterprise sitting with a big pot of money in case they have to site another landfill. So we've already had it here, we're going to Outagamie and now in Brown. We can't take any of their money to balance the budget. It's like the sacred cow. But we can take Parkview, which is an enterprise, and for 3 years in a row, we used 3 million from Parkview. So the thing came, you have 4 enterprises, but you're putting one totally by itself. It's still gonna have those funds because of the way it's set up, but it's public works.
I agree, I do, and I know that may not be.
And I don't know, do they have different bylaws that we can't touch them?
I'm curious about that. I have been puzzled and I understand being territorial. I understand being afraid of change. I will admit, beginning my inquiry as to why solid waste is such a different amount of, some things are not making sense to me, so when you talk about flow, I think it possibly should be moved. And I'm open to being told why not.
This is where I actually wish Paul was here. I'm kidding.
You know, you're still protecting the integrity
Yes.
of that board, but you're putting it in public works, which it is public works.
I think.
Garbage and recycling is public works.
I know that Paul has served.
But then you have citizen people on that,
Yes.
which is gonna go into your question of what do we do? How is that governed? State statute, or is it?
Right, what does statute have to say? And I think the other thing is that even though statute may say something, we may do something else, just because statute, what it does, I mean, it lays out a framework. So statute says that your Board of Health has to have at least one civilian citizen. And if we have three, because there's nothing in statute that said you couldn't have it more than one, how do we
That's okay.
interpret that? Right,
Yeah,
it's
how do we
okay by
interpret that?
statute.
And that might be, has been okay?
Right.
No.
So I mean, same thing for the solid waste board. I know Paul's been on solid waste for a long time. This is actually, this is an area where I would like, you know, I mean, about that, but I honestly do think it belongs in public works. I think that, yes, it is an enterprise, but the other enterprises we have here, like you mentioned,
They're all,
they're already nested under other committees.
aviation isn't, and the
Right.
only reason I think maybe it isn't, from my perspective, is because it's hooked up with FAA and BOA.
Right.
And is it public works? Not necessarily, because there's no commercial flights. And it is county owned, and I just think for ease of flow with how we get a lot of funding from FAA and BOA, I think it needs to stand alone, and that's just my thought.
I agree.
I can't, and yes, it isn't Appleton and it isn't Fond du Lac.
But it's special, right? Because we do have,
We have,
you know, we're not Austin Straubel, we're
Right.
not, you know, we're not the Allegheny County Airport,
we are a general
Right.
airport,
but we're still a very busy one that
Yes.
has the biggest air show.
so I don't really see it fitting under public works, I just don't.
But I would very much entertain the idea of moving the solid waste board to public works.
If we get the questions answered,
I think this would be something that we could probably take up with Corporation Council on.
Yes.
Right now, I have chapter 15 up of our county code
okay,
that, you know, basically defines what the solid waste board is. And so, you know, I don't necessarily see anything here that would, if we were to decide to make that recommendation to put solid waste into public works, would that therefore then interrupt and usurp their sovereignty of charging fees? And would that interrupt their operation, and how would it interrupt their operation? Would it actually be in any conflict with chapter 15? Thus far, I'm reading through it right now, and again, I'm just reading through it,
okay,
but I don't see how it would actually usurp any of this, where it would somehow take away its individual sovereignty and its autonomy. That should be a better word
Mhm.
a better word would be is take away its autonomy. But I think this would be a question to volley off of the Corporation Council on and get an answer back next month to find out if it would somehow interrupt the autonomy of solid waste if we were to make that recommendation of bringing it over to the Public Works section. And at that point, then, you know, that would certainly help us make a decision going forward.
Mhm.
And, you know, of course, I know that was something that Supervisor Eisen brought forward at the previous
Right.
meeting. But we still have questions. It
Mhm.
appears that I'm not the only one that has that question. A lot of us do. So I think that should be an action item or a discussion point for the next meeting, is to have that on the agenda for the next meeting, is to go to Corporation Council and find out. You know, I'd be happy to volunteer.
Tell, and ask Marianne, if we move solid waste to public works,
Mhm.
do they lose their autonomy?
Right. And then the question is then, works, it would make sense that, I mean, I'm sure there are other counties where if their public works committee fees that exist within statute that they're allowed to levy.
Because none of that comes before county board, when they're
Nope.
raising their tipping fees and
Right.
that does not come through.
It
the
doesn't,
county.
but then again, also PNF does have discretionary authorization that they can do that doesn't get to the county board.
Right,
So there are scenarios where a resolution or an authorization will come before the committee, and it doesn't wind up going to the committee or commission report, it never, the county board as all never sees it because
It doesn't need.
it doesn't need to be seen by them.
What I don't want to have here is that they think that we're shuffling this around and that somebody's process, and I'll keep bringing up solid waste, but Board of Health, Human Services, we're not trying to take anything away. We're trying to combine like with like.
Right.
And if we do that, do they still have their autonomy? And we don't want to, our goal here isn't to upset people that are on any of that or those departments or anything.
No,
That is
no. Yeah.
no intent here whatsoever.
There's no malice towards any committee chair, any commission chair.
Any
board chair,
department head, we're
Any
not,
department head, any committee
No.
member, no, there's nothing. The object of this exercise is to figure out if there is a better way and more efficient process, how we get business done. There is no malice towards anybody here at all.
no.
And I want to make that incredibly clear every step. of the way.
Yeah. So we're down to, we've got 9 instead of 12. If we left it stay right as it is. We may have 8,
Eight, yeah.
which I feel good about.
I do too.
I feel good about that we've consolidated and I think we've done it the right way. I'm sitting here going, Health and Human Services, of course. And I'm on part 2, but I think it belongs there.
Are there any other concerns about land conservation? I know they get grants from the DNR and from and possibly the EPA. I don't know if they've ever gotten a grant from the EPA, but I know that they do work with state and federal, FEMA, possibly. But I mean, it doesn't seem to me. And if we want to talk to Chad or Corporation Council or Vice Chairman Barr, we can. But it doesn't seem to me that it creates any issues. I mean, you talk about natural resources, land conservation, that's the definition of natural resources.
What you'll get the flack from is people that sit on Parks and Rec and people on land
Sure.
conservation, they want to stay as separate. So they're gonna say you're taking committee membership away from us. If we're at parks, because the land conservation people make it the committee assignment. And it's like, you can't look at that when you get up every day and say,
No,
we're not intentionally skewing anything.
Well, something that I picked up on both Ozaki and Fond du Lac's presentations were, again, I understand wanting to keep things separate, but in doing some of the combination, it absolutely increases efficiency through the board. It reduces it. Some of the meetings, yes, they may go a little bit longer, but in the long run, like for example, when Fond du Lac County Board Chairman mentioned something about their budget meeting only being a matter of hours as opposed to ours being days. That's what I'm interested in a positive change. I understand that the change is hard. It's not punitive to anyone, but I'm really hoping that the argument of increasing efficiency of the board and this county, which I think will ultimately save the money. Where we need to go.
What I've noticed with Park and Rec right now, they're having a meeting tomorrow. They've already had a meeting at least once this month. They're jumping around having meetings because something's coming up and tomorrow is something that's important and I guess they think they gotta act on it. So if they want to have a meeting about something within their realm and they're under natural resources, how is that going to work?
I'm trying to remember how the Fond du Lac County executive brought that up, because I remember there was something where he brought up where, if something doesn't meet a certain time, then it's still put on the agenda. and I can't remember. I'd have to go back to him. Does anyone else recall what he spoke
I
about
don't-
there?
Remember what, but I said, well, what happens if one of these needs to meet again?
Right.
And you're on that committee, but it's only one of those parts, and they need to have a action meeting, because like either a contract at the, like fireworks thing, that would be just Parks and Rec, it has nothing
Or
to
a
do.
grant authorization or something
Yeah.
that's time sensitive.
There's a time sensitive thing. If you serve on those committees, you have to realize then that you may have to come in and the only thing on the agenda will be something for Parks and Rec.
Right.
It doesn't happen that often, but you have to know that it might.
I think what he mentioned is that there's some of these more time sensitive files that they still have an extra window. Do you have, possibly, review the minutes from Sam's?
Which was April 27th.
I think it was April 27th.
April 27th.
Yes.
Complete. This is March 29th.
What I don't want to get into is that one grouping is meeting so much because there's
One item.
one subcommittee
Right.
and, because that's what's going on in parks right now.
Right.
Sometimes they're having 3 meetings because there's time sensitive stuff. I get that, but
Is that something that, is that just, for lack of a better term, is that because that's the style that the members and the department head like? Or is that because of time sensitive nature?
I almost think it might be committee oriented.
Right.
Something comes up and somebody on the committee talks to somebody on the committee and says, we gotta meet, because what they're doing tomorrow at 3 o'clock, I'm not sure that's time sensitive, but
Let me look
They-
and see what they're doing tomorrow.
they do, they got one item that's the hot item. So that's what I'm hoping we don't run into this, because like your Board of Health, if we had another pandemic, they might have to meet a lot.
And then there's gonna be there may possibly be some changes in state statute that may force it to be more often.
And then we're talking about consolidation and also time saving. And yet we may not, if any of these individual groupings have to meet more than.
I do think though, I mean, kind of pivoting back to the argument that if you look at the GPS model. I mean, we've gotten that committee, and I'm sure, you know, before Brian, Bill Winger, we got that committee to a point where it still is very well run. And I wonder, like, for the groupings and stuff like that, I mean, yes, you will have contingencies. Like, for example, if Eric Rasmussen has something that, you know, JPS has to be, I mean, JPS needs to be.
You gotta have a
to certain
meeting.
topic. We have to have a meeting. That hasn't happened, at least during my tenure. It may. And I think the reality is that just at times there are going to be instances where that just
It's gonna happen.
it's gonna have to happen. And I guess, you know, what I wanna know though, specifically with parks, because everybody can make an argument that their committee deserves, or the commission board needs to stand by itself because X. Everybody's gonna be able to make their argument to
Mhm.
some degree of validity.
Mhm.
And so I just want to, like, you know, there's the bar that, you know, the individual members may set because of hesitant or resistant to change. They may feel like they're being targeted, but they're not, but they may feel that way. Versus what the actual bar is. And you know, I wonder, it's like, okay, so why wash trail? Offer to purchase them rather than
parcel adjacent to the trail in the town of Oshkosh.
And that only involves them.
The question is,
Could it have waited?
could it
My
have
question
waited
is,
or?
could it have waited till their regular meeting?
Right, or, and I don't know, I don't sit on this committee, so
Right.
I don't wanna point any fingers at anyone.
No, but I
still,
mean, that's an example.
Right.
of what-
Or could this have been done a couple weeks ago, but the committee members couldn't meet a couple weeks ago, right? Typically these offers, I mean, yes, there are some instances.
The
where-
so to clarify that, the appraisal just came in.
Okay.
From the state.
Sure.
So and they all have it. I even read it, 54 pages. It's like, you know. And I didn't see a time frame in there that they had to react, so I was kind of surprised that it's,
Maybe it's just,
and maybe they feel it's very important to,
and it may be,
and it may be.
I
I
don't sit
don't
on
know.
parks, so I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
But if they're in that grouping, then they would call and nobody else needs to meet, but they do, then you.
But I think within the grouping, like, for example, if we had an emergency management committee, Eric is currently doing surveys,
Mhm.
right? Stakeholder surveys about emergency preparedness for Winnebago County. Okay, so what if the chairman of that committee says, Eric, can you share those results with us? And the reality is, you know, he can, he also may not have to. I'm not saying this is busy work, because that certainly is not busy work,
Right,
right?
right.
But, you know, I think, I just think it comes down to the way that these committees want to conduct themselves. And I'm not saying that we should enforce uniformity, but at the same time, I think if we want to make this more efficient in terms of our operations and approval chains, what are the committees that really do need to have one-off meetings, like planning and zoning, versus ones where it's nice to have, but it's not necessary?
Highway meets twice a month right now.
Well, a current discussion I had with the county executive's office that I think pertains to this when it comes to the flow and maybe frequency of meetings. I understand that there's always going to be exceptions. There will always be an exception. One of the things that I'm interested, that I mentioned to county executive is I'm going to use the word permissiveness, that the board, committees or chairman just because they've always done it that way. But if I have something that I mentioned to Mary Ann, if I have a deadline at 5 o'clock to file my brief, the judge is going to slam his gavel down if I didn't make that deadline.
Correct.
One of the things I would like to address that I think Fond du Lac and Ozaki addressed, where it really piqued my interest, is this creates more accountability, because that's the way I'm going to say it. Yes, there will be exceptions, but just scheduling meetings, that is not always making sense to me.
Do you know why?
What?
I mean, the question is like, okay, highway meets twice a month.
They always have. That's the
Why?
answer. And I go, why?
Why? I know, I'm not trying to be, I'm genuinely curious,
Yeah,
right? And so that's,
I mean, like, with planning and zoning, we actually have a reason why.
Yeah.
It's like, we have to, they have to visit those sites, they actually have to do that, and then they have to have a separate time where the neighbors can come in
At a public hearing.
and have a public hearing, and then at that point, you can make a decision. You do need time, to make that decision when you're going through, when you're approving or not approving or amending zoning changes, so that part makes sense to me, as long as we have a reason why, so.
And right, and we don't have deliberative the same night we have public hearing, because when you have the public hearing, some things may come up that you need some correspondence from an attorney, a township.
sure.
So there's a little bit of, not that they can speak at the deliberative,
Sure.
but you have the documentation. So there's a reason why it flows that way.
I think,
But for now, I'm gonna say it just, it's a thought to keep on the natural resources because it's there.
and I guess the question here is that, hello, Paul.
Oh, are we- oh,
The question here for me.
I like it, Paul.
The question here for me is that operationally, do you have to have this meeting twice a month, 3 times a month, or is this the discretion of the chair or the committee as a body? That's, it's like, because for planning and zoning, they have their visitations, then they have their public hearings, then they have their deliberations. That is the most efficient way to do it, right? If highway meets twice a month because they don't want to have a big agenda, they just want to split up into 2 pieces, because that's the way it's always worked, and that's the way it always will work. It doesn't seem to me that deliberately, in fact, I'm the committee, but I may say, does that actually slow down approvals that go to the board at large? Because you have deadlines that you have to meet?
Mediation, we've only always had one, and we've had deadlines, right? But we work. If you're prepared ahead of time, you discuss it, and you know that the next month it goes to the board.
Yes.
We have not had special meetings. So,
that aviation.
have not had needed to do that, and there's a lot of grant flowing going on, and things like that. But, yeah,
And I also do think if anything, I mean, we're talking about, purchasing a parcel. I would also think that if you're gonna run that committee the same way that Parks is run, anytime you get a grant in front of you, and you may have 3 grants to consider in a certain month, but you're not gonna have 3 meetings.
right.
You're gonna have 1. So
And there also is, you're given time.
Right.
That you tell them,
you can digest the information.
and you have to get it to the board.
Okay,
All right,
so with that, do we want to discuss any other items?
are you guys okay with this? These 9? Ryan and,
I do have, I would like to bring up one thing.
Okay.
And this is just, I just wanted to throw this out here, is, in regards to aviation, aviation technically also is public works as well. What things, why would we want to have aviation as a separate group or a separate committee? And, I'm just, this isn't like something rhetorical or anything like that, but just to simply asking a question. Entertaining that question in regards to aviation.
okay, so here's my thought. Facilities, property management, and highway. I'm not sure I get that one other than it's public works. Aviation, to me, and I'm gonna just say this, aviation does their own facilities, does not do a lot for them out there. So what I'm saying is, if you think they got a lot of buildings out there, which they do, but they do it in-house, okay? The other thing was the BOA, Bureau of Aeronautics, and the FAA. It's an airport, it's a general aviation airport. I think there's a lot of side steps to what goes on there as a general aviation airport that I don't feel it should be mixed with highway and facilities property management. Is it public works? You could do a stretch and say, yes, it is. I don't know what part of it's public works, because there's no commercial. So it's all tenant-based and business-based. So it's really not public works, other than the tenants are Mr. Public. I just thought it needed to be by itself and not mixed in with public works. I think it suits itself to be separated. So that was my voice. And maybe that's not enough to say that, but I don't think it fits well with highway and facilities. And I'm not sure that highway and facilities fit together, if you want my take on it. And the airport's not going away because we own it. And it's an enterprise. But the enterprise thing I'm gonna give up, because we're meshing Parkview as an enterprise. We're meshing highway with facilities. I guess maybe it's an
No,
ask and I just,
I haven't actually thought of that, but I'm wondering, and you might be better, you are better able to answer this question. One of the reasons that I have always thought that our aviation is a separate, it maybe not necessarily under public works, mostly both, is that our airport is a very unique animal. It can't be compared to other county airports, and that's why I thought that it was different, but I am open to the discussion.
it is unique and FAA and BOA say it's unique.
Also the
And they like the airport and they like, I don't know. I'm just doing my pitch.
I am.
And you have a good point. I understand, Brian. And I get where you're coming.
On a more lighthearted note, how many airports around here do you get to see a B-52 flight? But I think Public Works is one that, in my opinion, there are some questions about the flow of Public Works, but I do think, you know, we put highway facilities together. Those are the best places I can find for that. In terms of, I mean, maybe we could rename it from Public Works to.
I don't think a facility is as public works.
Right,
If
I
you
mean,
really
could
want,
we rename it as,
could,
you know, highway and internal operations or something? I'm just looking, you know, can we fortify item one? That's what I'm trying to look for.
highway is
Public
public.
operation.
Public operations. Because facilities, I mean, you're dealing with public property, public grounds. It is county government's taxpayer property. Public operations.
Are the parks and recreation natural resources?
I was
mean,
just about to ask that if we.
you could tear that apart.
You could, I mean, we could move parks to public operations and rename it public ops. Because then from there, natural resources stands as either your extension ag and land conservation. Just those two, and then public operations then goes into those three then. Well, technically four if we move the solid waste board. Then are we designing something that's too big? I gotta think about that for a second.
Think about, I don't want to snag this all up, but think about parks and recreation.
Sure.
Is that really natural resources? It could be and it could not be. It could be
We
public
could
works.
rename natural resources.
But I don't like public works because people think roads and sewage and then you go, well, solid waste. Yeah, if you could have a trickier name for number one.
Public operations.
Brian, what do you
The
think
only
about?
initial- I'm
semantics,
thinking
but still,
operations
yeah.
is because it's more.
Or internal operations.
What's your thought on Parks and Rec?
As Parks and Rec, I mean, I think that, you know, we could put Parks and Rec into Public Works, and I'm fine with the Public Works definition myself.
You are, okay.
Yeah, I think that Public Works is simply I mean, a lot of other counties use it, not
I
just
know,
counties, but
because
cities.
it's there, so they use it, yeah.
Right. So that's just kind of like, you know, if you're in Winnebago County, that's probably what you would think is like, you know. oh,
Your public works, okay.
Right. So I think that we should stick with Public Works. That's my 2 cents on that. But I mean, I could see Parks and Recreation being grouped into one with the Public Works simply because it is something that the county owns and operates. So, but it also works in natural resources too.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
So to me, it's a horse apiece.
Okay,
It is, and
It
the other
is.
thing is, the one thing I worry about, because if we're moving the solid waste board into public works, that's big enough to go with.
Mm.
If we move parks into there, then I wonder about the flow.
Yeah.
I wonder about the flow because we're dealing with solid waste over here, parks over here. Plus highways here and then facilities here. I get it all kind of falls under roughly the same umbrella, but I mean, if we're talking about raw sewage, and now we're talking about boat landings.
so if we settle on something here, which we're not that far off, and we give this recommendation to J and P.
Yeah.
Okay, which you guys have all sit on that, so I'm kind of like the Lone Ranger here. So what do, if, you're gonna look at this again on judiciary.
Right.
So do I trust that what we do here,
I think what we vote on here and what we authorize to send to JPS as a recommendation would be strictly adhered to in what JPS would draw up as a resolution. Because from there, it's our recommendation, but I will make clear to the chair of JPS is that we're not,
we aren't giving this recommendation for you to,
for you to rip apart and then piece back. and
Right,
piece
'cause that
back
wasn't-
together, because
right.
that wasn't the intent. The
Right.
intent was to work in good faith between the two of us. And I think the chairman of JPS very much is on the same page with that.
Okay.
I think he is, I don't speak for him, obviously,
no.
but in working with him, I do believe that he would respect the work that we put together and would go from there. I think he would read the report intently. He would be open ears to this. I know on this specific topic, he is open to it. And he is amenable to the conversation. And he would respect our work. And then the other thing is that JPS, the reason why I think this should come from JPS, number one, legitimacy, number two, the nuts and bolts of what a resolution would look like. Do we need one or do we need two? And there may be a world where we need two because we may do an ordinance change to authorize something else, and then in the same, possibly in the same county board meeting, then we would need to do the rule change, which would actually authorize these. The next question is, when would these be implemented? Would these be implemented at the start of the 2024 term, or would they be implemented sooner? So the question about implementation, I think, will be a question more for JPS, but I don't think this. Doing this just over halfway through the term probably isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
I think waiting until the beginning of a new term, have the dust settle in the election, go from there. With that, and then if the new board of the organization feels like doing something different, okay, then they feel like doing something different.
so you remember when you all
Right.
got elected, you fill out the form of committees you're
Yes.
gonna be on.
Yes,
So somebody that's really a techie sees information technology and personnel finance, but doesn't want anything to do with personnel and finance.
Right.
But they want to be on the committee because information tech is their forte.
Right.
I still don't see how that's gonna be a good mix, but I see that why you're doing that.
I
So
just- I-
we're kind of, this is a whole new experience of what's gonna work.
I guess the other thing you could possibly do is just by being on both JPS and on technology. I don't think the workload for JPS would really increase that much.
Oh, with information technology.
I don't think it would. I don't think it would. Use my 2 cents. I mean, if it feels otherwise, it's okay. But we hardly manage a meeting order, and I don't think.
So can we, boy, I hate to say have another meeting.
Can.
I don't know that are we there?
So here's what I'm gonna lay this out, all right? And before I do though, I want the other members here moving IT to JPS. I do feel like that flows a little bit better than putting it in finance, because I don't really know where else. I don't think it has, I seriously, I mean, just speaking very frankly, just no offense to Patty, just no offense to any of the other committee members, just our agendas are so light. It certainly doesn't need to stand alone, I think out of all of these, it has the least compelling argument to stand alone. So I'm okay with looping it into JPS, but I want other people's opinions before.
It's, it's difficult because it fits in a lot of categories. I mean, you could also make that case too, that it fits into public works,
Yeah.
like I stated before. It fits into a lot of categories. With, the thing of it is with JPS, we do have, we are very much kind of like, the predecessor of what we're discussing today because of how many different departments report to us. We do it quite a bit. And, so obviously this would be adding that part on to something like that. And then, I think that, one of the really cool things for me, just from my own personal experience, is just how all the different things that I got to learn just being on a couple of different committees, being on planning and zoning, and then moving over to judiciary, public safety. And even though, the fact that I had to learn about, a floodplain map, I learned a lot very quickly. And I went from zero experience to suddenly I'm turning into like an expert on this stuff and, having discussions with FEMA and the DNR and everything like that. So I think, I understand that for those supervisors or freshly elected supervisors, that might be a techie. And they're like, well, I'm not really sure, if I want to get involved in personnel and finance, but that's where that would have to be. I understand that, from their perspective, but I think that what they don't realize is that they could be learning a lot of other subjects too, and that'll be, I wouldn't say part of the fun, but it could be fun, because there's a lot of things here that are fun, and but also gives them a better sense of purpose as a supervisor too, to learn about other subject matters. And that was one of the things that we brought up in regards to that separate resolution that we passed at the last organization meeting in regards to term limits on committees, is the ability to have that rotation of supervisors going from different committee to different committees so that they can learn different aspects about the Winnebago County and be a more well-rounded supervisor so that they understand a little bit about how everything works within Winnebago County. So I think that we would be fine with keeping information technology with finance and administration or personnel and finance. I mean, but if it ultimately comes to JPS too, that's fine too. I mean, I'm on that committee. What's another one?
The other thing here, which I do want to say, if we move down to 8, that means we would have 7 on each committee, plus the chair. The reason I would say 7 is because legislative is stand alone, because 7, you will have 8 members of legislative.
I always prefer odd numbers on committees, because that then avoids ties, right?
Or you can choose not to be on any committee at all.
Right, yeah.
You still have that option.
I mean, I don't think, well, we have 15 of major jurisdictions, 36, math doesn't fit in there, so. Now that'll be up to the chair.
But the opportunity is there for people to serve on committees.
Yes, and also I do think, if we look at. Well, the other thing I think we should include in our report is index which ones need to have citizens.
Oh, what does Board of Health have for members? 7 or 9?
Because here's the thing, IT has a citizen. Now, do I want to know if that person in question wants to sit on PNF. That he is a former supervisor himself,
Okay,
who now sits on the IT committee, very big wealth of knowledge.
Okay.
But the thing is that, and this is nothing against him or the committee, we don't do a lot.
well, yeah, I know, but yet it's an important, information technology is so
Right.
important to making everything flow.
Right.
But my tenure on the board, sometimes it didn't meet for 4 months,
Right, and so, and that's what I'm experiencing too.
and Patty moves on.
Right, and Patty, she will, if she has a capital project, she'll bring it to you.
Yeah.
If she has an update on security, she'll bring it to you.
Right.
Right, so I think, look, I mean, there are gonna be some rather difficult discussions surrounding citizen members. I don't want to lessen the opportunities for citizen engagement, but at the same time, I think if we're looking at the way that this board runs and the way that it gets approvals done, I think the thing is, one thing I was really stunned by was just how quickly Fond du Lac is able to get things done. And we lag so far behind. We do, and maybe I'm putting that into extremes, but I think they're able to get stuff done pretty quick. And I think there's value and a lot to be gained from debate, but I don't really feel like I don't really feel like debate is the problem. I feel like it's just bureaucracy, which is, it's like, because I feel like we're having plenty of debate. I feel like there's plenty of debate in Fond du Lac too. It just seems like we could be doing a little better, right? Could we be doing, are we just doing really bad? No, we're not at all, right? But could we sand out some of the imperfections? Sure. And look, and I only have my set of experience. I'm limited to that, but I've read and listened to as many people as I possibly can throughout the course of this to learn what I do not know. And all I know is a lot. So that for this, I think just looking at why we're doing this, that there's a reason why we're doing this. And that's, we need to be able to,
And it's not personal,
it is not
it's
personal.
to keep the
at
flow,
all.
get the flow
Yeah.
flowing.
It's not personal at all. And I think everybody on this task force should make that crystal clear to everybody they look into. We're discussing this, but anyway, I digress from my rant.
Okay, so we have to find out about the boards,
Yes,
the 3 boards. Everybody in agreement?
correct.
I want to know,
Who their citizens are.
and number of
Not-
people,
not
because
who,
if you're
but
having a health human services, how many people
Do
are
you have a
there?
roster, Julie?
Yep, I've got
Okay.
the directory open.
Okay.
The Board of Health, I have 10 members.
I'm unmuted. Can I ask you a favor, Judy? I remember finding it once on the county website. Where are you looking at the structure that lists the,
I have to look at
I'm trying to pull it up and I can't find it.
what the choices are.
It's in that one handbook. right?
Okay, sure.
It's in our little
Yeah. On
hand.
the county's website, if you go, sorry, I have to go back because I'm already in it.
So
That's
we
okay.
have 10 members of the Board of Health. How many of them are citizens versus supervisors?
It's under government and then county directory.
So 10 members, and how many are county board supervisors? Do you have that or not?
Yep. There are a number of vacant positions, but I still think, and I did have, sorry, my mouse is not cooperating. On the statute, statutes, a local board of health shall consist of not more than 9 members. At least 3 of these members shall be persons who are not elected officials or employees of the governing body that establishes the local health department and who have a demonstrated interest or competence in the field of public health or community health.
So no less than 3 can be citizens.
Non-elected,
At least 3.
So you have to have at least,
3 non-elected members.
so at least 3 citizens.
And no more, not more than 9? Why do we have 10?
Shall not or consist of not more than 9. And we have. Wait, if you put your mouse just right, it does some.
So right
Here I am, Board of Health.
Go ahead.
We have Rachel Youngquist, Ralph Harrison, Jeff Bean, Karen Powers, and then there's a vacant seat.
Okay.
Then 1, 2, 3, there'd be 5.
5 and 3,
So we have 8 currently.
8, maybe.
So statute says it cannot be more than 9.
Yep. So we have, actually in our, I shouldn't say this, but in our directory, we have an extra line.
Okay, and so, and then at
So it's 5 and 3 that we have.
least 3 citizens.
Right.
Currently, because I'm just writing this down so I can have what the state wants
Mhm.
versus what we have. We have 8 members. 5 supervisors. 3 citizens. Okay. Human services.
Um, that was page 9 members currently. 5 of the 9 have to be county board supervisors. Which one? That's what we have. And then we have, 4 citizen members.
Okay, so statute says,
Look that one up. I can if you want me to. I can find
sorry, I don't
it.
mean to make more work for
No,
you.
no, no,
Yeah,
no, no, no,
I
no.
just want to make sure I have this down, because this could,
So that sways number 5 as to quantity of.
Right.
members.
this could save me a rather lengthy.
Um, This is just the blurb that comes up when I,
Sure.
without going to the, in a single county or multi-county Department of Human Services, the County Human Services Board shall be composed of not less than 7 nor more than 15 persons.
Not less than 715, so it has to be between 7 and 15. And how many of them have to be citizens?
Okay.
Here it is.
Is that was human services?
Yeah.
Okay, and
So. shall
Board of
be
Health?
This
composed
is
of-
5 of 9 should be.
So you can have,
oh, yeah,
not-
so 5.
Okay, not less than 1/3 nor more than 2/3 of the county human services board members may be members of the county board or of supervisors.
oh, that's a puzzle.
And that's what-
Well, if you do 9,
So if you do 9, then we can have 3,
you can't have less than 3
less than 3.
or
Okay,
more
so
than
we'll
6,
do supervisor.
right?
Okay,
We're
so
doing
not less than 1/3, but not more than 2/3
nor
can
more
be
than-
supervisors.
Right,
Yeah,
Okay, and
that's
then,
all I'm thinking of right now. I'm not thinking about the citizens.
and then so currently, so currently we have 9 members. How many, and then could you give me the breakdown of what we have again?
we have 5 county
County
board
board.
members,
Mhm.
And 3 none.
So we really-
3, 4, we have 4.
4.
4 none?
Yeah, so there's 9.
Oh, okay, so we do have the numbers.
All right, and then, solid waste.
That one I can't find a good answer in the statutes. We have what it says underneath the solid waste board, 3-year terms staggered, a 9-member board with 5 county board supervisors. The membership needs to include 2 Needham-Menasha, 2 Oshkosh, 1 North Central area, 1 South Central area, 1 Western area, and 2 at large. They're all appointed by the county exec. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 5 citizen members. And actually the citizen member is a chair. Wait a second.
Yeah, that I know.
I apologize, there's 4
citizen members?
citizen members.
Okay, so 4 citizen members.
Okay.
And then we
1,
also
2,
have
3, 5.
5
board.
supervisors.
So everybody, all of these, the 3 boards all have 5 county board supervisors, but they also have to have citizens.
Yes. So I think for our health and human services, then,
Wow, how do we make that work?
we have, if we had a health, if our health and human services had,
I get the county board, but what do you do about the citizens?
I think you should keep 4 citizen slots,
Yeah,
and then we would have a total of 9.
9 for that board and 9 for the other board of health, and then solid waste is a little more.
So
Well,
we
that's
would-
5 and 4.
5 and 4. So if anything, we're giving more power to citizens. Because with IT, now, the one thing I wonder with IT, in statute, do we have to keep, like, is that citizen slot on IT mandated by statute? Is that just
When
something?
did that come into effect? I don't remember anybody being a citizen
Right.
that was on IT.
There has been a citizen member for as long as I've been in the clerk's office.
There has been a member.
Is that mandated by statute, or is that just something we do?
Let me see if I can.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Because if that's mandated by statute, then we may have to think about. Because I don't know if we're gonna want a citizen, with all due respect to the citizen. I don't know if we're gonna want
A citizen
member on
as-
PNF.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know if the board at large would like that.
Yeah, because that could be kind of, so now you're gonna have Joe Citizen sitting on PNF
Think unelected,
and unelected, and that could
that
cause a row.
could cause problems. Now granted, if we just eliminate the committee and keep the function.
Yeah.
Would that still require us to have, because what some counties do is they eliminate the committee but keep the function. Like in statute, we're supposed to have an emergency service committee, we eliminate the committee but kept the function.
I'm sorry, I'm not.
You're not finding that?
If there's nothing there in statute that says that we have to, then I just think we should eliminate the committee and move Patty's function over to PNF. and call it a day.
I would completely 100% agree with that.
Because if there's nothing in the law, and granted, I'll run this all by Mary Ann again,
Yes, please.
but if there's nothing in the law that says
You have to have.
we have to have a citizen member, that I think
Then you.
what we're building here gives citizens more power, and I'm for that. I am for that. But at the same time, having a citizen member on PNF, in my opinion, may be a bridge a little too far.
I would agree with that.
That gets to be a selection choice
Yes.
that might,
Is the question
Might
is
be
that
dangerous.
Is that, and then the question is that if the county board chairman just gets to pick whoever he or she wants to serve as the
Yeah,
could possibly be
Whoever.
chairman of PNF.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, now.
And
that
then
gets-
can make those discretionary funding calls without board. The question is then are we creating administrative state and not?
So as it stands right now, you would eliminate that committee
And just give the function.
if we can.
If we can. If we can just give the function of that committee over at PNF and just strike the.
Mm-hmm. And then I'll
committee
just keep
as it is.
emergency management. That's how that one went.
Yes, because technically in statute.
Because we used to have a committee for emergency.
Yes, and that just got. Blobbed.
Yep.
You could change that.
Yep. So who's gonna, you think Mary Ann will find that statutorily that we can,
Yeah, because
or not find it?
what I will do is, I think the thing is that the only changes I would support to this proposal being at the JPS level is anything that has to be done to keep this legal,
Mhm.
and that would be it, right? If Mary Ann says, well, actually, your Health and Human Services Committee has to then have 4 citizen members instead of 3, fine. That's okay. And then also who gets to appoint them? Is
Yeah.
that the county executive or
Or the county
or the
board
county
chair.
board chair? And I'm also, I don't, this may just be maybe naive, I don't really care. I know that John Van One Tom Egan will, but I'm not really going to care who gets to appoint them. As long as they're there and it's legal, I'm okay, and I don't really mind who gets to do it.
So then, under Health and Human Services, if you've got 2 boards that have to have, how many members are we gonna have on Health and Human Services?
So we have to find something that fits within the criteria
Of
those 2, and so statute says the Board of Health cannot be more than 9.
Yep,
Okay, statute for human services can say cannot be less than 7, but cannot be more than 15. So 9
9,
sounds like the right one that fits within both of them. Now, Board of Health says you need at least 3 citizen members. Okay. Human Services says not less than 1/3, but no more than 2/3 can be supervisors. This reads like an elementary school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is one of those algebra.
yeah, 2 trains going in the same direction, one
Right.
started out at 10 o'clock and one.
So I guess for that, then,
That's a little more messy,
so if we have 9 members
of the Health and Human
of
Services.
the Health and Human Services, 1/3 of, not less than 1/3, but no more than 2/3 can be supervisors. So technically then we could have, and Board of Health says you need at least 3 citizens. So technically, if we really wanted to min-max this, we could have 3 supervisors and 6 citizens. But I think we could do 6 supervisors. We cannot do any more than 6 because it can't be more than 2/3.
Mhm.
6 supervisors,
And 4 citizens,
3 citizens.
3 citizens.
Because. keep
We
in mind,
think.
This
We
is
think.
health or human service.
Health and human services, because one of the items for Board of Health is can't be more than 9. Now, I will run this by Mary Ann
Yeah,
and said, does the legalese for this just fall within the puzzle solution that we created?
because if
or-
it isn't, then you pull the 2 boards off.
Right.
And then you got Parkview standing by itself.
Right, and so my guess is that we can do this because other
Okay.
counties have.
Okay.
My question is that what do we do to satiate state statute requirements? And we could have 6 supervisors and 3 citizens. We could have 5 supervisors and 4 citizens. We could also have that. So the question I'm gonna open up to you guys is, what would you guys rather have for Health and Human Services? Would you rather have 6 supervisors and citizens, or 5 supervisors and 4 citizens? Or
And one of those
supervisors and 6
citizens could be
citizens.
chairman of that department
Right,
and then go to legislative.
right. Well, I mean, currently, that's what
Oh, that's.
the chair of human services does currently.
yeah.
Right? He does. Paul has something to say. He has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I have a statement I had emailed to Jacob's email, and that pretty much sums up what I would have to say. And
Okay,
any restructuring that we would be doing, if you go to the UW Extensions Government Center, that was the email originally sent by Brian Defferty, the link, the Government Center stated categorically that the two situations where you would want to combine and adjust committees is one, in the instance when you downsize your board and you need to adjust committees to meet the new board size. And the second would be if there are committees that are too powerful, that the county board believes that those committees are dominating the decisions that the county board should be making. So with that, I would suggest that you review that link that Brian had given us and put that in the realm of deciding if you wanted to really shuffle committees together. The other recommendation, I appreciate Chairman putting in the option number 3 that I had suggested. It could be a final compromise or a step in the direction of actually combining those committees in the future, perhaps at a time when the board would in fact be downsized. That's about all I have.
Thank you,
I'm
Paul.
transmitting from Cracker Barrel.
Oh, I love Cracker Barrel. It's a good restaurant. It's a very good restaurant. Thank you. Let me know what you get at Cracker
Yeah.
Barrel. Sounds good. So
In consideration of what it said, and in consideration of whether it's 6354, 36, I have noticed that service terms are different. For example, some of the citizens are appointed 2 years terms, others are 3 years terms, there's one 5-year terms. Can we change that? Before I answer the question, I would like to understand if we can change term length.
hypothetically, possibly, but the thing that I see is that I don't really see it as, because you have the citizens in your silo over here, and then you have your supervisors in your silo over here. As long as the citizens are there, I don't really think the term lengths really would interrupt the councils of operations. Unless if you can't find people to serve. You can just reappoint people if they're willing to do it.
Yeah,
But I
if you're
mean,
willing
like-
to do it, yeah.
Like if, now then there's the question, so if, but then, why I think maybe it's probably best to go with 3 or 4 people on health and human services instead of 6 is, what if you can't find 6 people to serve on health and human services?
6 supervisors.
Or 6 citizens,
Or 6, okay.
because,
Oh.
I mean, maybe you could, I'm sure you probably could, but just because you could doesn't mean you should. And if we can't find 6 people to serve, 6 citizens to serve on health and human services, that could be an issue. I like 4, willing to discuss 3. I like 4 because it kind of sits as a compromise between, you have 3 on Board of Health, 4 on Human Services, so we'll go with 4. We can't do any more than 6. And we already have committee chairs who serve on legislative for citizens. Okay. The
So that's
one
a moot
question is a former board member and a very tenured former board member, but still a citizen nonetheless.
He's a
And it
citizen now.
gets along just fine. So, I'm willing to say 5 and 4. And again, all of this is pending a conversation with
Right.
corporation counsel. And I mean, all of it.
Yeah.
But, I don't really think the terms are an issue. Because it's worth considering, obviously. But I think that will have to be something for and is already currently, I mean, look, in their current formats, it's something that both the county executive and the county board chair have to consider and make the appropriate preparations for and advertise these slots appropriately. And this is why, if we were being really ambitious, we could talk about Board of Adjustment, and ADRC, and all that stuff, but I do think that that's not major jurisdictions.
Right.
And then we could really be getting into the weeds. And are we knocking over trash cans that don't need to be knocked over?
There always have been in my tenure, and I should know this too. There are people from the citizens that call
Right.
and ask to be put on these.
Sure.
They want to be on certain boards.
Right, we do.
So they are really adamant about being like the one we're talking about is. Sure. I'm not a county board supervisor anymore, but now I'm citizen. Can I be on that?
Right.
So there are a lot of calls. I don't think we'll lack for people calling in.
Right.
That know, because once they know, they know. But again, you need their blood too. So what does that leave us with then if you're still saying 5,
So we would
and
have
the citizens would be 4?
5 supervisors, 4 citizens would be health and human services. It
So
would
what
be-
does that do to the overall health and human services count? What do we have for just
We would
5,
have 9 members,
9 members, 5 county board?
yes.
But you could have a citizen being chairman of that number 5.
As currently. You could,
Okay.
but I mean, at the same time, I mean, if you look at the Human Services Committee as it currently stands, you have a citizen who is
Chairman.
chairman of 5 county board members and 4 citizens. So one of those 4 is chair
Of that
of that,
human services board.
yes,
But now you're making, it could be of 3 former.
Right.
2 boards and a,
I do think the people who apply to these kinds of things, now, again, maybe we could write a rule that, or we could include this in the resolution, that then the chair has to be a supervisor.
because what you're doing here is you're taking a committee
Right,
and putting it with 2 boards.
2 boards.
And then and that committee right now is 5 county board members.
Right.
So now it could switch.
So what do we think about for health and human services that now, again, I don't want, this is all
Pending
that it
all
doesn't run
these-
afoul of statute.
Yeah.
What does the committee think about ensuring that the health and human services chair is a supervisor?
I think that, yeah, we should go forward with that. One thing about, and here's my reason, is that, it's great that we have citizens that are participating in this and they are very much, we want them to give them that connection to the
Correct.
county and say, you are just as much part of the community as we are. We're literally here to serve you. So, at the same time, though, they are also appointed. They're not elected. And I think that, there should be a little bit more teeth in regards to those who are actually elected rather than simply appointed. So with that, I definitely think we should have in our recommendations that we look at that the chairs of these committees should be supervisors and not citizen members. I agree.
Because you will have somebody that doesn't run that get on a committee.
It could be in perpetuity.
Yeah,
That's-
That's-
perpetuities, yeah.
as
Yeah,
long
and
as they
that's the
have-
thing is like, when they're appointed, I mean, they're appointed. That's just, it is. They're appointed,
don't
they're
have to
not
be a
elected.
And then they get reappointed, yeah.
So long as they have the county exec or county board chair that they like,
Mm-hmm.
you could be,
You could be on for 15
you could
years.
be chair of human services for a council.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so I think it's good because like at the end of the day, it's not taking away from the citizens who volunteer their time and their effort to this. But when you take out your papers, you take out your nomination papers, you put your name out there and say, hey, I want to be a leader in this community and I open myself up to public scrutiny.
Mhm.
I think that's awfully fair that you could say, as a supervisor should be chair.
Mhm. If that's all,
If, again, big asterisk pending a conversation with corp counsel. But, and as soon as this meeting's done, I will email kind of this rough sketch out to the office and say, this is kosher, right?
and have we decided group-wise that information technology becomes part of PNF, but no committee? Or what, it's not a committee
Because the
anymore?
question is that what do we then do with the citizen member?
Right,
And then I think the other question is, does PNF, okay, we can apply logic that a citizen cannot be chair of PNF. Should a citizen even sit on PNF? I don't,
again, you have.
I don't
another
think
issue.
so.
Yeah,
I don't think so. And like I said, at what point does it become, why even bother running for county board when I can be chair of PNF because I can just be appointed to it?
I can make a phone call and I can get
Right.
appointed to PNF and maybe I can be chairman,
I can
and I
help,
don't have to run.
I can help my buddy out, run for county executive. If that person wins, I can call in favor and there you go. I don't like that.
Exactly.
Because now you are gonna have people say, then why did I run?
What's the point?
Because my goal was to sit on PNF and I had a pretty good chance of being on there.
Right.
But why would I run if I could come up in the other door?
Right.
Okay.
So I think,
Do we want to have another meeting then?
I think we probably should because
Just
I
one? maybe
do
one
want to,
more?
and maybe in a couple weeks.
Okay.
I do want to, I think we have a rough draft of what we, like a very rough draft of what we want.
Yep,
It needs to be proofed past corp council first.
yep,
Then we can write a report, send it to JPS, and then JPS can write a resolution. Or what I will do is actually, once we do pass anything, I will just tell corp council, write it according to this. And then from there.
but give it to JPS.
Yes, and then present it to JPS.
Yep. Because I don't want any hard feelings at JPS on this meeting. So I don't want anybody to have hard feelings that we're trying to shove it down anybody's throat.
Right, and we're not.
Because that was our
Right.
intent, was to give
Right.
something to JPS, but we can't do a resolution.
But we
so
can't write one ourselves, so
right.
we should probably say. What I will do is, as chairman, to say, okay, here is, I'm just using this as a placeholder,
Mhm.
here is what we want. This is our recommendation. I will talk to the chair of JPS and say, I would like this.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
And I'm the outsider. So my thing is, we should have one more meeting,
Yes,
and then I think we've done our task.
yes. Finalize it. I had a placeholder item on the JPS agenda for June 5th. I may have pulled that off. The other item here is that our counterparts in per diem world would like us to move faster. With all due respect to the members of that task force, I don't really. Because if we want to get this right
Mhm.
and have the board like it, can't railroad it, don't want the impression that it's being railroaded, don't want the impression that thanks, but no thanks on your opinion,
Mhm.
see ya, right?
So if we postpone it a month, not our meeting, I think we should try to meet.
Get this to JPS by July.
Yeah.
And then from there, JPS will consider it at July. There is then the question of, so I will have to, this is kind of moving ahead into the future.
Yeah.
Let's say we finalize a proposal, make the proposal to JPS. JPS likes the proposal,
Mhm.
JPS then votes to send the proposal to the board. Hypothetically, that would be put on the agenda for the board in July.
Yep.
Instead of just having it voted on in July, I know we don't have a special orders meeting, but I would like to talk to Chairman Egan and just say, could I do, for all of us as a group, do a presentation to get the board to start thinking about this, instead of saying,
I concur.
I
hope the chairman will be.
I think you know.
I think you will be too,
because this is a lot.
it's a lot, it's a lot, and I know that everyone's gonna, this is definitely something that everyone's gonna have an opinion on.
Yep.
And that they're gonna voice it 3 times over. So we need a special orders meeting just to answer all of those questions and address everyone's.
And if that means a separate special orders meeting in August, perhaps if Chairman Egan would let us, I don't know how busy the July business meeting is going to be. And if it is a lighter agenda, if he would allow us to make that presentation at the July business meeting. With that, but that's a conversation with him that I will,
Yeah, because if it's a loaded agenda, we don't need to add to it.
no, we don't. And, but again, the last. thing
But
I want- yeah,
that's a good plan, but I think we need to meet one more time.
Because I want to talk to.
We gotta
corporate
get all
counsel.
these answers.
Yes, and I spoke to corporate counsel today and it left
When is
me
she back?
Wednesday, Thursday.
Right. Oh,
She's back on the 30th.
But her staff are doing some research.
Okay.
And my conversation with corporate counsel today honestly left me with more questions than answers. This meeting though has given me more answers than questions.
okay.
So I will then go back to corporate counsel, and this has actually helped me answer some of the questions that I had for all of you, actually, mostly all the questions I had for all of you. That I can then give to corporate counsel and say, here's what I'm looking at. Here's what us, it is not, it's us as a task force, what we're looking at. A, we will need your help wordsmithing this. I can try to take a crack at it myself, but I would rather have an attorney write it. And just legally speaking,
Mhm.
is it sound? Because the last thing I want, this task force wants to do is to run afoul of open meetings laws. We almost did tonight. And make sure that just all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Because
We want to be ending with this task force because
yes,
we don't want to keep coming back
Yes.
because we're moving ahead. here.
yes, and I do think. And that'll, we can, I guess, then we can, actually, but before that, let me just talk over what I'm gonna talk to corporate counsel about. Let me just write it all out and just make sure it's all okay. Item 1, which is called Public Works,
Mhm.
consists of highway, facilities, property management, solid waste,
Solid waste. If we can,
if we can. And then from there, if we can include solid waste. Would then have. It would be one of the bigger ones where we had 5 supervisors, 4 citizens. Chaired by a supervisor.
that's important.
Do we feel comfortable with that?
See, to me, that's muddying the waters to have these boards on. But we're trying to put people in groups, committees and
We're
groups.
trying to create.
So we gotta move forward. It's different, but it's different.
I'm kind of leaning a little bit more towards 6 supervisors than 3.
So 6 and 3.
Doing the 6 and 3.
Can we do that with solid waste?
Let me see if I still have that chapter. I do. Let me take a look here.
On all of them, Brian, you're thinking that?
9-member board for solid waste, 9-member board with 5 supervisors.
two, yeah. So I'd have to be 5-4. It would have to be 5-4, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So this would have to be 5 supervisors.
For Public Works
Yep.
and 4 citizens.
The chair, that has to be a board member. Yeah. All right, item 2. GPS. And I do want to stress that we have 5 supervisors. So 5. One more question about numbers. So we have 5 supervisors on Public Works. GPS would stay as is and have 5 supervisors. Okay. Item 3, finance and administration. That will just stay unchanged, but information technology will be liquidated and the function will be folded into it.
It'll remain functional, but no committee.
So personnel,
And we just know that it's gonna become part of that, but we have to explain
Right.
that.
and I would just say that this is a corollary here. In IT will be liquidated. A little harsh liquidated. Function folded into.
Dissolved.
Folded into-
Absorbed. There we go.
Function folded into. Basically just in terms of saying Patty reports to the NF now.
Yeah.
For what's germane. Okay, number 4, natural resources.
Is that rule wise, everything is okay for her to report to PNF? Is that just is there any question legally? in it?
I don't think there's a statute.
Okay, all right, fine.
I mean, I will send all of this to corporate counsel and
Okay.
say, does this check out, right?
Okay.
And if not, where can we make some relevant changes? Number 5 would be natural resources. Before we dig into anything else, Julie, can we ensure that the 3 that we grouped here in natural resources do not have any citizen members? Because if we do, I'm okay with booting them. Just for the sake of, we're giving citizens a lot of power.
Yeah.
When jumping to the other committee,
Sure.
they are considering, and this probably doesn't even matter, but not paying the citizens.
Who?
And
Not paying the citizens.
the per diem crew
Okay,
for task force is looking at possibly not. UW extension is all.
That's gonna eliminate people wanting to serve,
all supervisors.
and it's trivial money.
it is. But I think you don't get into this for the money.
Well,
That's
Yeah.
what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
I think it'll boil down to, hey, do you really want to do this or not?
So let's just jump back to Public Works. We're gonna have highway facilities, property management, and we're gonna see if solid waste goes there.
We're gonna see.
So
Yeah.
if solid waste goes there, they're still a separate entity of Public Works. And they have 5 and 4.
The whole thing would be 5 and 4,
Oh.
unless
So you're gonna be a member of highway and facilities and
solid waste.
solid waste.
Unless there's nothing in, I just want to know what statute says
Yes.
about that.
That'd be
Because if we
interesting.
can do that, great. If we can narrow the number, because here's the thing, it may be a bigger ask to have some citizens say, hey, do you want to be on solid waste facilities highway? We like all that, right? I mean, do you want essentially a citizen to sign up for a JPS style committee that meets once a month, possibly more? You know, do we want that many citizens on there? I could see us getting 2, maybe 3. He mentioned code, but is that predicated on statute?
So you could have 4 citizens on here and they're a member of highway and facilities.
Correct. And so, again, that's giving citizens a lot of power.
That's gonna tick off the board members that are
Right. So I would like, now,
clarity.
here's the thing, there may need to be a rule change accompanied with that. So I'm gonna, not a rule change, sorry, an ordinance change
Yeah,
to rejig this so that we can amend our laws on the solid waste board in order to get its function into public works.
okay.
So essentially what you're saying is that just make it a solid waste board.
I'm gonna tell you, good luck.
That will be very,
That will not be a popular,
no,
no. So.
okay, well, you get those okay. Let's keep rolling with
Right, let's
that.
get, okay,
Okay, so UW Extension is all supervisors.
Yeah.
Parks is all
Parks
supervisors.
is all supervisors.
And land and water has somebody, or land and conservation, doesn't that have a, I wanna say why do I think Roger Zentner's
They have
part of it?
2, he used to be, they have 2, well, yes, they have 2 citizen members.
2
on land-
citizens.
Land conservation. And I think they have an alternate too. It's not listed, but I think it's on it.
See, this is more twisted.
Is that enforced by statute? I'm sorry to keep.
No, you're fine. This is good practice for me and I'm learning.
Is that enforced by statute or is that just something we did because we felt like it, or we saw a need for it at the time?
Boy, I would think there's some reason, because Roger's a farmer. When he was, there's some backside to that.
There is, yeah. And that's when we talk about necessity versus preference.
Mhm. So you could have more citizens. Health and Human Services gets twisted then too. When you put the boards with the,
We can make that down to 3.
6 and 3.
6 and 3, yeah.
County board shall appoint to the land conservation committee at least 2 persons who are members of the committee on agriculture and extension education created under another statute. So 2 from UW Extension are. supposed be
have
on
to
it.
be on land.
But it
Yeah.
doesn't say it can be one citizen.
The county board shall appoint to the land conservation committee a person who is the chairperson of the county farm service agency committee created. So that's where Roger and them
Yeah.
came in.
So
Yeah.
Roger has to stay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can.
Or,
make-
or
yeah.
whoever's on there now.
Whoever, that citizen slot, who is the county farm service agency, I get that correct?
Yeah,
They can appoint, the county board can appoint up to 2 members who are not members of the county board. So that's I think they could have,
So yeah, up to
3.
3,
right, well,
but so statute says you can, but it doesn't mean that you. I really wish we had that.
the word is may.
May not shall, which means
Yeah,
that
I
we
mean-
can, but that doesn't mean that
Right.
we have to. So
That's one thing I wanted to bring up too, and I'm just reading, just looking at the solid waste management board. How they stated it is, the solid waste management board shall be composed of 9 members, 5 of whom shall be county board supervisors, who shall also comprise the county board committee on solid waste management. It doesn't state that 4 must be members. It just says 5 out of those 9 must be county board supervisors. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that that's what per chapter 15 states. So, you know, it's how it's worded. Again, like you said, it would be great if Mary Ann was here to help clarify that language. But, you know, it just states that 5 out of the 9 must be county board supervisors. It doesn't say that 4 must be citizen members. It just says that.
So
4
5 out of the
can
9, 5 out of the 9 must be,
Must
so
be.
a minimum of
5.
5.
be A minimum.
So
of
you're
5.
telling me that we could have 7 supervisors and 2 citizens?
Correct.
We could have what, 7?
7 supervisors. So basically what that ordinance is establishing is minimums.
Yeah.
And if we say, hey, we're gonna have 7 supervisors, 2 members of the public, that A, keeps us within this ordinance without having to amend it. While maintaining citizen representation.
That's why I want to keep the board separate from the committees. Because those are already existing, and whether they're bad, good, or indifferent. But then we got to group them, so now there's where we.
Right.
get the top.
And I think the thing is that we talk about flow in government and silos, and I'm reading a book called City of Line about Baltimore's fiscal collapse and picking up the pieces. My dad grew up in Baltimore. He witnessed that growing up. A lot of the books says just government wasn't talking to each other. It just wasn't. And because solid waste doesn't, just because they aren't, because things are going relatively well for them now, doesn't mean that it won't be in the future. And I mean, if we go to 7 members of public works, we have 2 citizens. I think that's and a citizen cannot be a chair.
If we can, yeah,
If we can do that, then I think that is something that would be more amenable to this group. What do you feel about that?
we have to support the county board people who run
Yes,
versus a citizen that just
Right.
wants to be on something and
Right.
doesn't have to run, but I could,
Right.
I could possibly be chairman of one of these.
right. You
Right.
fought, you put your name up,
Yeah,
right?
Right.
then I don't
Right.
think I want to run.
Exactly.
I'll
If-
come in the other side,
I'll come in the other side and I
make
will
my
say-
phone call to county board chairman or county executive and say, hey,
And even if I'm not chair of public works, I can talk to the new chair of public works and say, you gotta do it this way, this way, this way, and
Yeah.
this way.
yeah, so that's not a good mix.
So I think 7 and 2 is probably for the best. We could even go down to 8 and 1 if we wanted to.
Right.
Well, what do we think about 8 and 1?
I'd be fine with 8 and 1, just as much as 7 and 2.
Yeah, that doesn't matter.
Okay, 8 and 1.
8172.
I currently still, I do think that's giving citizen appointments more power than the current have still. Right? But I think we want to make government flow. This is what we're doing. JPS 5, PNF 5. 13, 18, natural resources. Okay, we're at natural resources. So UWEX.
But there's, you got the caveat of 2 from UW Extension end up on Landon.
Right.
Well, that's okay.
You can make that work.
You can make that work. I'm not quite sure I understand that one either, but okay.
Talk to Rob Paulson. I don't know, that's something that, I mean, it's, I wonder, it's like some of these. One of the interesting part of the state affairs. To see why those laws were written. That's not a position or a comment.
Yeah.
So for that, you're saying we have to have 2 citizens.
On land conservation.
on land conservation. But even land conservation is a committee, it's not a board. So
Right,
even if we just
That's-
limited ourselves to the scope of committees, this still would have existed. The problem still would have shown up.
mhm. It just muddies the waters.
But I guess the question is, are they money already?
Monkey.
So there's a committee that's muddied already before we combine it with, into its own category. Land conservation is already,
Well, because the statute says we have to.
yeah.
Right, that's what Madison lays out for us.
See, and I think that's what somebody on the county board was trying to tell me. You can't combine that one because you gotta have two citizens, so it should stand alone.
But I think you can make that work.
Mhm.
And again, you're kind of seeing the trends, like this is Madison constraints based off the chapter. So that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just saying, it's like,
Yeah.
look, this is what the assembly and the senate.
That's
want us to do. And
yeah. Just
nothing we
think
can do
when we
about
get,
that.
when we get done here, we can go to Madison and get all those committees straight.
Um,
Okay,
So, okay, refresh my memory, Julie, about how many people we have to have as citizens on land conservation. And we had one who was the head of the Farm Service Agency. Who was the other?
Just a citizen.
Just a citizen. Now, does it,
Because, right, currently in our directory, there's 5 county board supervisors and 2 citizen members, and the one is, I mean, I know him, that he's he's with the USDA currently.
so it's
Does that
one,
help you? No.
yeah, so it breaks it down to one USDA
Yep,
person
and 1 citizen.
and one citizen.
I just wonder if there's a reason why the USDA.
Is that there because we like that person there and that person's a resource
Or-
for grants and
or-
other things? Or
Were we told it was highly recommended?
or did the Fed say this was contingent on money or?
There could be some backdrop to that one.
Or strings attached that came with a federal, like, did it come attached with the farm bill? Because the farm bill is $1 trillion bill every year. That's a big deal. I could easily see a world where something buried on page 5,387 of the farm bill says you have to have a USDA member on a county board.
Chuck would know, Chuck
It-
Barry would
it
know why.
says- It's a second statute under the land conservation committees. The county board shall appoint to the land conservation committee a person who is the chairperson of the county farm service agency committee, and or other county farm service agent. The committee member designated by the chairperson of the county farm service agency committee. So if that, like the chairperson of the USDA doesn't want to do it, they can appoint somebody else from the USDA committee.
But we're still
it's-
gonna get two citizens.
So 5 members, 2 citizens essentially.
Then the county board may appoint to the land conservation committee any number of members who are also members of the county board. And the county board may appoint to the land conservation committee up to 2 members who are not members of the county board.
Not shall, may.
Okay. So basically, we can say
Oh,
5 members.
I don't know if you wanna get rid of the farmer.
And
You
5
might.
members and 2 citizens, and
Yeah.
those 2 citizens would be Farm Service Agency.
Mhm.
And another citizen, but that others, it doesn't seem like there's something there that
That
says it
says
has to be
USDA.
USDA. It can be the USDA.
Mhm.
person.
No, that was a shall.
So we
From
have
the-
to,
From
so
the
we have,
USDA,
oh,
one has to be from, the county board shall appoint the land conservation committee, a person who is the chairperson of the county farm service agency.
and is that the USDA person?
Yes,
So we have 1 USDA person
yep,
and 1 citizen.
yes.
So we would have two.
Correct.
Total.
Yep.
So we have 5 members and
And
2
two.
citizens.
Mhm.
Yep.
One of those citizens though. Two citizens.
I think we've had somebody from the chairman of the farm for a long, it's different people, but we've
Right.
always had somebody.
As long as we're giving the slots available to have that expertise there. Because when you're talking about expertise versus preference, that is expertise that you need. And as long as we're giving that opportunity and having that outlet for expertise, I think that's okay. So we have, this way that, so now we have, so our natural resources is 7. With 5 supervisors and 2 citizens. Okay, so the next. HHS. Which is what we hashed out as.
Yep.
6 supervisors and 3 citizens. Or 5 supervisors.
6-3.
6, okay. So that is.
So we think we've covered health and human services.
Yes, but again, all contingent.
All things considered, we have questions, yes. But again, just to back up to natural resources, one of those 2 on land conservation could end up sharing that grouping.
Should we then add something saying that no chair has to be a board member? I think we should. Or, but I will open it up.
I'm sorry, say that was pretty good. Say
For
that,
any committee that has a citizen as a member,
Why that?
should there be a line item stipulated in the rules saying that that member cannot be chair, that those citizens cannot be chair? For all of them. Because currently we're sitting at 3 that are gonna have citizens on.
Mhm.
I think supervisor.
Just being fair to those that run for,
Exactly. Yes.
For
I
county
think that
board.
should be included.
whether it's 36 new people that we don't even know. I'm telling you, if I knew that going in, I'd go, I'm not gonna take papers out, I can be on that.
Right.
That committee,
Right.
and I can get reappointed.
Until the council.
Yeah. Think about that, because there's people that think that way.
6 supervisors, 3 citizens, chair
Yep.
has to be supervisor.
I think too, Maria, that also increases the, or excuse me, gives responsibility or increases, I'm searching for the right word, the engagement.
Right, it gives you more responsibility.
Mhm.
I think as a citizen, it gives you more responsibility because now we've opened up more slots
Right.
to what citizens can do and how they interact with their county government.
And they may or may not want to do
Right,
the grouping.
right. And, then we will.
Then it
get-
opens it up for another citizen.
And then we will get people who hopefully, if you want to serve, when I lived in New York, they had something called community boards, which were in boroughs in New York, they're unelected, they're appointed by the borough president. And it deals with things like public works and personnel finance for that specific neighborhood. You're not elected, but you are really in close
Yeah,
with government.
you're involved.
You're involved. So planning and zoning, that's unchanged. Aviation, that's unchanged.
And legislative, are we just gonna go, let that be the chairs?
The chairs plus the county board chair.
Yeah. Because now you don't have to say, and Board of Health and that, because you've combined.
Right. So 9 members, which are 8 chairs plus
So it's county board chair.
Okay,
All right,
this is what I will send off to them tonight. I will call the chairman of JPS as soon as it's over, and tell them to pull that item, and we will then wait. I will close item 9, open item 10. The next meeting date. I'd like to meet within the next 2 weeks. So that we can have something put together for June, not June, sorry, July, yes. But I also want to give plenty of time for us to do that. So
What's the?
What's the second-
Submission date for JPS for July?
the submission date for JPS for July is probably going to be the first Monday of the month. That's JPS always, right? So
I guess
July
it's
2nd.
June 26th.
Yes, June 26th. So we need
So
to
we
have that
should
by
meet-
June 26th. I will be out of town from June 16th to June 23rd. So what is that? What does June 12th look like for people?
it's good for me. Because the next week I got Parkview.
June 12th, other days I have here. June 12th is a good day. But I want everyone else to see.
I typically work second shift. What I'm finding out right now is if I'm able to take that day off. Okay. Find that out. Just.
And then you can work 2 other days.
I go-
You take 1 day off, Brian, and you work 2 days.
I'm open to a morning-
Yeah.
I'm open to a morning meeting.
I would be
For
too.
Brian, but-
To what?
Yeah,
To a morning meeting,
Oh.
either 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning.
right. If you want to do 9 AM, we can do that.
Oh, yeah.
Would that work for you?
If I know ahead of time, yeah.
Okay.
So do you think it shouldn't be a long meeting?
No, we're just gonna review the final. So what I will do,
So you'll get us something ahead of time
yes,
if you can.
so, okay, the first, I actually think we do probably need to have a vote then. So do we want to vote quick on having me write up a report based off of what I sent? Actually, no, I don't think we.
No,
Because then,
no.
let me send this to corporate counsel.
Yeah,
Let me wordsmith this proposal to corporate counsel. And then we will bring it back.
will you get us the information back before the meeting of
Yes.
the 12th?
Yes, so as soon as I wrap up with corporate counsel and say this is good, or this is not, or are you saying, then I will send it back to you.
'Cause
guys.
this may-
Yeah,
This may come back not so easily.
yes, right.
What are you doing, you guys? Yeah,
So for that,
okay,
we will meet June 12th at 9 AM.
yep.
Okay. Here, that'll work. Julie, do you have that date open for this?
That's what
meeting?
I'm hoping. You said 10?
9.
The 12th at 9.
I hope you have
It's like an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Looking for 2 just in case.
Two.
I might have to get together with Cassie. I don't do these very often. Figure out. how-
Because I see something coming together, but I just want a couple more questions answered. And I would rather get this right than rush it.
Because if we rush it and all these come to be innuendos, then we're going, it's gonna be tossed back and then we lose time.
And then the other thing is that once this gets to the board, assuming JPS likes it.
Yeah.
I don't. Like I said, I would rather be over prepared than under prepared. And there are gonna be enough questions that board as is. So I
So
just,
you could have a non-paying, if we don't get that the chairman has to be a county board supervisor, you could have a non-paid citizen be chairman.
right, and that's all the more reason to say, that supervisors should be chairs. Only supervisors should be chairs. Unless there's something in statute that says you can't do that.
Yeah.
Which I'm not determined, but I doubt there is. The other thing I can do is I can reach out to some members of the legislature. And they could have ledge council look at this and say, if there's anything else. Any sort of mandates on citizens serving as chairs, whether or not that has to be a concession made. If people would wouldn't mind that.
Yeah, I gotta get that clarified.
Okay, with that, Julie, are you okay for that meeting time?
I think so,
Okay, if not, let me know.
and 9 to 11. I know Cassie's planning on sending out the JPS. Can I tell her
Yes,
right away in the morning?
Please, yeah, and I'm gonna call Brian right away. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All right, cool. Let's do.
Which item was it?
8:26 PM.
No, to pull.
Oh, I have it. I sent something over to Brian last week. That would be the discussion, the work of the structure of the task force, and then consideration vote selecting the structure for the Winnebago County Board. And then I will also tell Melanie to come to those.